Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Well, welcome back to the podcast.
It's nice to be back, isn't it?
Why does it feel like we haven't recorded in a month?
Because we were away at Comic-Con last week.
Yeah. And then what happened before that? Because I don't know. It just seems like it's been a long time. Like, for example, we've already gotten off the rails. I haven't even said what episode we're doing.
What are we on now? I've lost track.
I'm supposed to say. Today, we are on Season 7, Episode 14, Chimera. This episode aired February 17th, 1999. Well, before we talk about this one, anything to say about last week's episode, Field of Fire?
The Esri mystery episode?
Hmm.
Yeah, she talked about it a lot on her podcast.
Who am I?
With Esri Dax.
So what did Field of Fire mean anyway?
Well, strictly speaking, I think it means the arc of fire from a particular position.
Hmm. And this week's episode has a mythological title.
Yes. A creature that's made up of multiple parts, if I remember it correctly.
Including a fire-breathing goat, as I recall.
Yeah, a fire-breathing goat would be pretty terrifying, let's admit it. I mean, goats are kind of cute and, they do funny things. So having a fire-breathing one, yeah, terrifying.
Yeah, because they're chaos. Chaos-breathing fire would be very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, a fire-breathing goose.
Oh, geez.
That I could see happening, yeah. They're bad-tempered and they make a lot of noise.
That would be very scary. Well, this week, you have the notes, so over to you.
Okay, so let's get started.
Mm-hmm.
We open on a runabout flying through space with Miles and Odo on board. They're coming back from a conference, and we see that Odo has bought gifts for Kira. He's got her little pendant, and he's got her some chocolates, specifically Rigelian chocolates, which are her favorite.
I think it's interesting here he says that he has presents for Kira. I never quite know, shouldn't he be calling her Nerys in that case? Not Kira? I think the writers get it mixed up.
Yeah, they can't keep track of it.
Yeah.
As Miles is a terrible partner, he's not actually got anything for Keiko, who apparently is still actually on the station, but has turned invisible because we haven't seen her for ages.
Yeah, we haven't seen her in a long time. But if you've only been gone a day and you've been married for 10 plus years and you have 2 kids, you can turn up without a gift.
Interesting.
I'd rather you turned up without a gift than some stupid knickknack that I'd have to put on a shelf and dust.
Yeah, you'd just be happy that they returned home so you could say, okay, take over the damn kids.
Well, that might be a bit harsh, but I'm just saying, they've only been gone a day. I think it's okay that he didn't turn up with a gift.
I think I would.
You think so?
Well, I don't know. You don't like knickknacks.
I don't like knickknacks. But that time I took, just the day trip up to Google, I did come back with a lot of little gifts.
Yeah, exactly.
Like pens and things that said Google on it. Back when Google was cool. This is a long time ago now.
Their conversation is now interrupted by an alarm, and we see a creature that looks like it's swimming through space. That's a great visual effect. It kind of looks like a whale. It's very well done.
Yeah.
Well, the creature flies off screen, and there's some rocking and clunking on the hull of the runabout, and surprisingly, it's not trying to mate with it. And Odo reports it's gone. Then they hear more clunking inside the runabout, and through one of the vents comes a changeling into the opening titles.
And a changeling in a nice suit. So probably not from the cult soup.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Doesn't have the robes.
Yeah, he's better dressed than the other changelings.
I had to watch this episode 3 times, because normally we watch them twice, right? I watch it once and then we do the notes. But I had to do it a 3rd time because it's been so long since I watched it because of things going on. And what I hadn't noticed is that the first time we see this changeling on screen and they're still doing the credits, and it says guest star Garmin Hertzler. Garmin is apparently the G in JG Hertzler's name.
In other words, General Martok.
And it took, you and I were watching it together the first time, I think, and it took, I don't know, somewhere halfway through where I thought, who is that person? He sounds so much like Martok, but it never even occurred to me that it was Martok until I looked it up. So yeah, it's Martok, but not really. It's the actor.
Well, back from the credits, and the changeling calls Odo a metamorph. It tells Odo to instruct the monoform to put down its weapon. So we see that this Changeling has the traditional attitude towards solids that founders do.
Yep.
He tells Odo that he sensed his presence and that he's been trying to find others of his kind. Miles is naturally suspicious that he's a founder, but Odo figures out that he's not a founder, but one of the 100 changelings that were sent out into the galaxy. And we get a quick recap of how the founders sent out infant changelings into the galaxy, and we learn that this guy is from the planet Virala. Miles remains suspicious, and the metamorph agrees to be taken into custody if Odo will vouch for his safety, telling Odo that he does not trust humanoids. So we're seeing he has the typical traits of a changeling, and if you also notice, he does not directly address Miles.
No, he never does. He just talks to Odo.
So it seems that changeling bigotry is already fully developed.
Yeah.
Now on the station, Odo is briefing Sisko and convinces him that the changeling is not a founder, as he's not afflicted with the disease that the founders are all suffering from. Sisko brings up how the founders have deceived them before, but Odo makes a very impassioned plea and convinces him to release the changeling into his custody.
Do you think either one of them remembers what happens with the baby Jem'Hadar that was also released into Odo's custody?
Yeah, they put that out of their memory. They've erased that one from the memory banks.
Yeah.
Odo and the new changeling are walking the promenade, and Odo is explaining how he left his people because they were behind the Dominion and the war, and how he feels the war is wrong. The changeling, whose name we've not yet heard, tells Odo that instead of conquering humanoids, it's best to avoid them altogether.
That's a better attitude than what the Dominion has.
It's true, it's a slightly better attitude. Question here. The guy doesn't seem at all concerned about the reasons why Odo objected to the war, or what he means by his sense of right or wrong. I think that speaks, again, to the changeling characteristic. They absolutely lack a sense of morality. He doesn't ask what I would think would be a natural question of, why do you think it's wrong? What is your rationale for making this decision?
Well, we learn in this scene how he's been around for 200 years and Odo has only been around for like 30. It did make me start to wonder if maybe Odo will turn into this as well over time.
Yeah.
And the difference is that he has only been around humanoids, and it's been for such a short amount of time. And during almost that entire time, he's been in love with Kira.
Ah, and you mean the way that even when the evil founder woman met Odo, she made the comment of, you weren't supposed to return for hundreds of years.
Right. So maybe he just hasn't had enough time to turn into them yet, but he still will.
Ooh, that's an interesting take. That's some scary headcanon there.
I think that's in my overanalysis. It's been so long since I wrote the notes, but I do think I have something about that in there, that maybe eventually all of them would turn into the founders.
Well, the new guy continues telling Odo that people don't much care for changelings, and Odo tries to convince him that the people here are different. As they walk, the changeling asks Odo why he hasn't tried to find the other 100, and Odo explains it's a huge galaxy, and the new guy replies, I found you.
Yeah, by accident.
True, but something else here. He said he could sense Odo.
Yeah, he did say that.
Can all the changelings do this? The other founders? Is this pointing out that Odo, perhaps again, is different from the other changelings because he can't do that?
Well, again, maybe it's because he's quite young, and eventually he will gain that sense.
But this guy wouldn't have had any chance to practice that.
Right. So how did he sense a thing he's never been in contact with another one before?
Yeah, because this would have been useful for Odo earlier when they were dealing with changelings popping up all over the place. If Odo could just go, completely. Oh, yeah, he's one.
I think you have to be at least 100 to have that sense.
Oh, okay. Odo also explains in this scene how old he is. I think for the first time we get a definitive age. And he said he first assumed humanoid form 30 years ago. Okay, we have to go into some headcanon here. Calculation time. So from reading, people have calculated that a Bajoran year is approximately 0.717 human years. So if you do the math, that would make Odo around 21 and a half human years, but 30 Bajoran years. So from a human perspective, if those dates and calculations are correct, Odo is actually pretty young.
Why would the year be so different? What evidence do we have of that?
Well, people have calculated the star dates given in the show.
Yeah, but the star dates are baloney most of the time.
A true star date unit is supposed to be 1,000th of a year. And people have calculated that a Bajoran year from dates given in the show, it's around 700 Of course, because it's Star Trek, the dates actually vary.
Yeah, the dates vary. And sometimes I think they just throw stuff out without going back and looking at it to see if it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
All right. I'll allow it.
Well, the new guy continues to be condescending, telling Odo, "Oh, this is all so new to you. He first assumed humanoid shape 200 years ago. He goes on to say he was fascinated by human life in the beginning, but he found it limiting. He was never fully accepted by the Valarans, and humanoids are not very tolerant of difference." Odo tries to convince him that the people here are tolerant, and he replies that other races are all basically the same. They're nothing like them.
Yeah, he says they just have a few bumps on their head or something.
Yes. A little bit more of that founder supremacy coming out.
Well, it's an oversimplification, just shows that he doesn't know anything. Has he ever encountered telepaths or empaths? I mean, these people are quite different.
Odo seems a little exasperated by this.
Yeah.
And says he'll take him to the quarters he'll be staying in. I know part of this story is kind of an allegory for generalized racism or bigotry. But with the races on this station, some of whom have transparent skulls, have psychic powers, basically all manner of strange attributes, colors, don't you think that just adding in one more creature to this already absolute crazy number of different races and species and cultural norms, the things that make all these different races up, just adding in one more feature of, oh, you can turn into a table if you want. Okay, that's your thing, cool. I mean, look at Klingons. Look how we go back to how their morality compared to humans is so radically different. And the Trills. I think biology, culture, behavior of all these races would be so different. You would be kind of forced to have to accept just another feature that somebody had if you wanted to be part of this, or if you wanted it to thrive in that environment.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think from the standpoint of maybe all of the founders and this new changeling guy, they've got this just superiority complex.
Yeah.
I mean, he says a lot of things in this episode about humans that are trapped inside themselves or humanoids, whatever. Yeah. But if you look at it like they have physical superiority, which makes them sort of all powerful around these humanoids. And so, of course, the humanoids are going to be afraid of them. And if you look throughout history at people who think that they're superior, it generally is because those people who think that they're superior, they have power in some way.
Yeah.
It's not just a matter of they're superior, but they've got access to armies or weapons, or they just somehow have control of the government. And so they end up thinking, well, it's because we're better. It's just like, it's not because you're better. It's because you're lucky that you're the one who has the power. And if things were shifted in the other direction, it would be completely different. Probably superiority complexes in the other direction. But I sort of think of that as this new changeling guy keeps talking, which is it's very easy for him to say that they're inferior to me because he could so easily kill them, hurt them. Yeah. He's so much more powerful. So to me, it's not exactly the same as just accepting another race or another species onto the station or into your group because the power dynamic is so different.
But I think that you would run into that kind of power dynamic between races anyway. Look at that race that lived in a very low gravity environment. Your bones would be weaker, your structure would be weaker. You'd be physically weaker than anybody on the station. And a giant Klingon could literally crush you to death.
The woman in the wheelchair, right? She experienced that because people did look down on her as being lesser and not capable. There's a power dynamic there. If they were on her planet, the power dynamic would be shifted.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's mixed into it.
But don't you think that's part of the Federation of they're supposed to be accepting? The founders of just taking this approach of, oh, you're all lesser.
Yeah, and I'm saying that they think that they're all lesser because they have all the power.
But the power's there with other races that manage to get along.
Not like this. These people are almost like gods because they don't die. They live forever. Yeah. They can turn into anything, and they're stronger than everybody else. I mean, we've talked about this a lot since the beginning of this show, which is Odo has all the power.
They're still mortal. You can still shoot them enough times with a phaser.
Yeah, but not everybody has a phaser.
You can still kill them.
Yeah. Just the power dynamic is tipped, I think, so far in their favor. That it means the guy with the power, the changeling dude, he doesn't care about anybody else. And he shows that through this episode because he can do whatever he wants.
I think we're on the same path here. I think that's entirely the problem. I think if you weren't behaving in this supremacist manner, then you would just be another race.
Yeah.
If you weren't too busy telling everyone how they were, limited solids.
Totally. Yeah.
Then from a Federation standpoint, it would just be like, you can turn into a table. Cool. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. Everybody on the station wasn't terrified of Odo, but they're all terrified of the founders.
Yeah, because of their behavior.
Because of their behavior. And because that they've shown the power that they have.
Or they're prepared to abuse it.
Yes.
That's my point. That's what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah, I don't think we're saying anything radically different.
Getting back to the story, Odo takes the changeling to his new quarters, and we learn his name is Las, which means changeable in Viralan. Las looks at Odo's changeling workout gear and says, "This hasn't been used in some time."
How can he tell that?
There's no changeling goo left behind.
It's an inanimate object. Maybe it was covered in dust.
Oh, there you go. Lars finds a picture of Kira and tells Odo he once had a mate on Virala, but it didn't last because they couldn't have children. I mean, perhaps they could have discussed that at some point?
Yeah, and we find we haven't talked about it, and Laz and his mate never talked about it.
And of course, the only way to have children is the biological approach.
Yeah, there's only one way.
It's the only possible way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to speculate here and say maybe it was because Lars is a complete jerk that it didn't last.
Yeah.
Lars now asks Odo more about their people and how they reproduce. Odo explains to Lars how, in their natural state, they don't exist as separate entities and how they spend most of their time in the link. He asks Odo to show him, and they link, and we get some goo time.
And I was thinking, Odo's going to give this guy the STD now.
Yes, they do this without protection.
Yeah.
After the link, Lars tells Odo he gave up a great deal to remain here. Odo replies that he has.
Mm-hmm.
Lars tells Odo he knows because of the link, the only reason he stays is Kira. War or no war, he would be a founder. Now, is that really true?
Well, I don't know. I mean, he says he knows it because he linked with Odo, so maybe it's true, but I'm not sure I believe that that's the only reason.
Yeah.
Because I thought he really was unhappy with what his people were doing.
Yeah. I'm wondering whether it's Lars misinterpreting. We know Odo wants to join his people, but can't because of how they behave. So maybe he's misinterpreting that desire of Odo to be part of the link as, Odo would join the link regardless. Would Odo drop all of his morals, his evolved sense of justice? Would all that just be discarded to join the link? And would he be happy if he did that?
Well, I mean, he did it briefly and then found out he wasn't as happy when Kira was being hurt, right?
Yes.
I wonder if we talk in this episode later about Laz not knowing what love is like.
Yeah.
So maybe the first time that he encountered that through the link with Odo, and maybe that's the most important thing to Odo right now. So maybe that is really brought to the surface. I don't know. I don't know how the link works. But maybe he was just, overwhelmed with those feelings in the moment, ignoring the other part of it, which is, and by the way, they've caused genocide. They have no empathy for humanoids. They don't care for them. All they do is kill. All the rest of that stuff is in the background.
Right. So he's just sort of skimming surface thoughts.
Maybe. I found that a little bit hard to stomach. Although, I don't know what comes from here. Maybe that is the true reason. Maybe Kira is the only reason he stays.
Yeah.
By the way, this last scene in my notes, I call it Afterglow.
Okay. In Odo's office, he is looking pensive when Kira comes to visit him. She says about the new changeling and asks what he's like. Odo then gives a great response saying, he's complicated.
Jerky, just like the Dominion or the other founders.
He tells Kira they linked, and she asks, when can she get to meet him?
It's really interesting because the linking between the female changeling and Odo was played up for its sexual side, right? That it was a real intimate thing that they were doing. Yeah. And here, these two guys linking, this is not something we normally show intimacy between men on Deep Space Nine. It's fascinating to think about the person who really hated any sort of...
Even a hint.
Sort of hint, yes, at this. Did he miss this? Did he not see this? Because it's really pretty blatant.
Yeah.
And in this scene, I wasn't sure how I felt about Kira. She was really concerned that they had linked. And I mean, on the one hand, she has a right to be cautious because that's how Odo got sucked into the cult before. And some really bad things happened.
Yeah, the damage it did to him.
Exactly. And to her and to the station. And Ram almost got killed, remember? But on the other hand, it does represent Odo's natural state, and it's not something that she can relate to or understand. But also, they don't really talk about it. And I wonder if I could see this being a really realistic thing to go on in a relationship, that they don't talk about it because that was sort of a terrible time and it was a bad thing that happened and it kept them apart and it almost kept them apart permanently.
Yeah.
And so they just kind of set that aside like that never happened. Because when we come here, Odo is cautious to tell her about it, about when he links. And she is uncomfortable about it, but it's just like we just sort of tiptoe around it. We don't actually discuss it.
That's a good point.
It's just really interesting.
Yeah, you could see she was definitely concerned about him doing that. And given the history, yeah.
Yeah, and it's either because of this intimacy with another person, which are we in a relationship or not? Or it's just, last time that happened, you almost joined the cult.
Right. We go to Quark's bar and Odo is taking Lars to meet Kira, Ezri, Miles, and Julian. Ezri tries some small talk, which doesn't work.
Yeah.
Kira asks about Varala. Lars describes it as the same as any other planet overrun with humanoids. Nice.
This guy's a barrel of laughs.
He then tells a story about how he spent some time as a herd animal called a Volg, and how it was always the same where humanoids thrive. They upset the natural balance. I love the self-righteous attitude of the changelings like this.
Mm-hmm.
We kill and murder and genetically modify creatures and commit crimes against generations of sentient life forms, but we're so superior to humanoids.
Yeah.
Lars continues saying he prefers the so-called primitive life forms. They work on instinct. No words get in the way. No lies, no deceptions. I guess this is because they're easier to manipulate.
Yeah.
Easier to turn into service beings for the founders, who can then treat them like gods.
Yeah, if only he knew what went on with the Vorta. 'Cause it sounds like this guy'd be right on board.
Well, they're lesser. They're humanoids. We're doing them a favor.
He really sounded like Martok in this scene.
Yeah.
Well, if he prefers primitive life forms, he should go hang out with some snails or something.
Well, Miles seems to get annoyed by this and says, we're not the ones who can disguise ourselves as anything we want. Odo asks, what does that mean? And Lars tells him, he means shapeshifters can't be trusted. Well, I think that's because of your actions more than your abilities. We've seen what changelings behave like when left up to their own devices. Certainly the founders.
Your actions and also your words. These humanoids were actually trying to be friendly with you and just have a simple chat, and all you did was insult them from the moment you walked in because you don't think that they matter.
Yeah, this goes back to my point. The Federation and these other races, they're trying to get along. They're trying to build a galactic society.
Oh, they are.
And the changelings like Lars and the other founders seem to have this built-in, you're all inferior. We shouldn't even have to try. You should just treat us like gods. Well, Miles won't be provoked and says, I trust Odo. And then Lars continues saying, you can trust Odo because you've convinced yourself he's as limited as you are. And really condescendingly says, I'm very worried for him. Oh, this guy is great. Odo takes his leave and ushers Lars away from the group.
Yeah.
Turning to them as he exits and giving this exasperated shrug, Miles, always the Joker, shouts, nice to see you again. So it was a complete disaster.
Yeah, and Kira looks pretty worried. She's very uncomfortable. The rest of them are just like, oh well, but she looks nervous.
Yes. On the promenade, Odo asks Lars if it was really necessary to insult his friends. Lars calls the humanoids tragic creatures, saying they've lost the ability to take joy in simply existing, and that they've not evolved to the next level where consciousness exists independent of form. This is it right here, the founders' belief. They are more evolved. Not differently evolved, more evolved.
It's such a small-minded view of somebody who lives forever, right? To say that the humanoids have lost the ability to take joy in simply existing. It's a luxury to just enjoy existing. When your lifespan is so limited, time is different. To some degree, it reminds me of an extremely rich person telling people to just enjoy what they have.
Why are they? You're right. It is, isn't it? It's be thankful for what you've got.
Yeah. It's like I'm really sure that what's missing from the life of someone toiling away in a job they hate just to feed themselves and their family is that they're not taking time to just enjoy existing.
Oh, yeah.
Or just enjoy what they have.
You're right. Odo criticizes Lars, telling him he makes grand generalizations, to which Lars replies, he speaks from experience.
Sure.
Then Lars tells Odo they should link, in the open, out on the promenade, and then has a little rant about how Odo doesn't want to do anything that would remind them, the solids, that he's not truly a humanoid. Well, humanoids sleep and have sex, but you don't see them doing that on the promenade.
But also, I mean, he makes it seem like Odo is ashamed of who he is, and that's why he doesn't act like a changeling. But really, it's to show empathy for the others around him, which is just a thing that none of the founders are able to do. And this guy either. I mean, this guy will make a perfect founder. That changeling woman is going to love him.
Oh, yeah. It's going to put her off Odo. She's like, yeah, we don't need Odo anymore. This guy's a great replacement.
We get this guy.
Yeah. Odo tells Lars that he does not like to do things that may make people uncomfortable, which is a reasonable enough point of view. I mean, granted, it might be tricky to draw where that line is, but I get the point. Lars then asks Odo when was the last time he assumed another form, and Odo can't answer. Oof, that seemed to sting Odo a little bit. Lars is on a roll and goes on to criticize Odo for his relationship with Kira, telling him she can't link with him, and if he's lucky, he can watch her grow old and die. This now starts to annoy Odo, who tells Lars to stay out of his affairs. Lars again repeats the phrase that Odo is limiting himself and says they should leave and find the other 100. They could form a new link together.
Yeah, every conversation just gets more and more uncomfortable between these two.
Yeah, this changeling is definitely one of the children of evil founder woman.
Absolutely. And Odo should have said, I haven't been able to act like a changeling because of budgetary reasons.
Oh, look, we have a limited effects set. Do you know how expensive that is? In Kira's quarters, Odo tells her about Lars's offer and how he didn't reject it out of hand because he didn't want him to take offense. Kira is not thrilled, telling Odo that he linked with Odo, and he got the impression that he might not be happy and want to leave. Odo tells her it's wishful thinking from Lars. He hugs Kira, and she tells him she's sorry she can't link with him. Odo tells her it doesn't matter. He loves her regardless.
Odo acts here like maybe Lars knows something that he doesn't. But it's not that Lars knows something that he doesn't. He's projecting his feelings onto you.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
In Odo's quarters, we now get a chance to see just how advanced a changeling Lars is, as he can replicate fire. But somehow he still finds faces difficult.
Yeah.
Odo is here to tell Lars he's not leaving, and asks Lars to actually stay on the station, saying he would like the company of another changeling. Lars agrees, saying, I won't abandon you to these monoforms. Then it's goo time and they link again.
I don't know. This makes me think Odo now, he's got this little boyfriend on the side. I mean, am I wrong? Is there not a sexual overtone to the linking? Am I making that up in my head?
I see what you're saying. I'm not sure.
I mean, it's intimate at the very least. And it's not something that Kira can be a part of.
You might be onto something there. Thinking about it, it does in some ways almost seem like Odo is having an affair. And Lars does make a comment about that later. We go to Odo's office and we hear a commotion on the promenade as there's a fog. Miles thinks it's the environmental system and Odo tells him, no, it's just Lars being fog. And now we see he can be fog, but he still can't do faces.
Well, fog is pretty easy.
Odo calls to Lars and we get a great, smoke effect where the fog morphs back into Lars. And he tells Odo he was just relaxing. I think being a jerk might be a better explanation. Watching all of this are a couple of very surly Klingons who march up and ask, what is this founder doing here? Odo tells them to move along, but Lars manages to provoke them into a fight. And one of the Klingons pulls a knife, plunging it into Lars, which of course has absolutely no effect. Odo pulls the guy off, and the second Klingon appears to go for his disruptor. But Lars does a total T-1000 move and transforms his hand into a long sword, spearing the second Klingon in the chest. And we go into a dramatic ad break.
I mean, he was completely without emotion or even really any kind of reaction when he did that. He barely moved.
Yeah, he didn't think anything of this.
Yeah. And he didn't have to kill the Klingon. He could have just knocked him over or knocked the weapon out of his hand. But
tied him up.
Because the Klingon was absolutely no threat to him.
Yep.
But unfortunately, that's not what happened.
When you have absolutely no concern for the other life form.
Yeah, no respect for the humanoid
you don't
life,
even care about it. It's like, oh, it's nothing. In Sisko's office, he tells Odo that Bashir couldn't save the Klingon and that the Klingons now want to extradite Lars, claiming the dead Klingon was only going for his knife, so deadly force was not justified. Odo brings up that the Klingons are only doing this because Lars is a changeling. Worf, perhaps naturally, takes the Klingon side, saying he should not have provoked them. That's, I thought, was very Klingon.
Yeah.
Odo brings up that they were the ones who actually attacked Lars. He also objects, saying that he won't get a fair trial with the Klingons, and Sisko tells him it's not up to him, it's the magistrate's decision. Odo gets very upset from this point, saying, you never wanted him on the station, I had to practically beg you to let him out of the holding cell. Sisko now gets annoyed, telling Odo, that's enough. Then things get even worse, as Martok has requested that he does not feel it appropriate for Odo to be in charge of the prisoner. He makes the excuse saying it's because Odo is a witness, not because he's a changeling. And I think we all know that it's really 100% because he's a changeling.
Yeah. And Odo has really returned to the defensive, surly Odo of the early seasons.
Yes, it's like the very defensive Odo. You're right.
And he says he had to practically beg Sisko. He didn't have to beg Sisko.
He did make an impassioned plea, I thought.
He made a case, but yeah, I don't think he begged him.
I did watch the fight scene several times, and it does look like the Klingon was going for his disruptor.
And if they just had video on the promenade,
they
could use that.
So I think they made it ambiguous enough, so as a viewer, you're not sure.
Yeah. When Odo storms out of the room, the look on Sisko's face is like, this is exactly why I didn't want this guy here. It's like, I knew this was going to happen.
Knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
On the promenade, Quark is actually waiting for Odo, and he tells him that he's sorry about his friend. He goes on to tell Odo that people don't want to be reminded of what he's capable of, that humanoids have a built-in fear of the unknown because it might kill them. Their tolerance for other life forms doesn't extend past the 2 arms, 2 legs variety. I know this is a budgetary thing, but wouldn't we have other races with more limbs, less limbs, different limbs in different places?
We would totally have races with more limbs or fewer limbs, yes.
I think this is a bit of a traditional humanoidist approach here from Quark.
Yeah, for sure. Quark also says a thing here about if Kira is anything like me, she doesn't want to see him turn into goo. And I think I find that really funny because Kira is nothing like you.
Right. He tells Odo that he's really just trying to explain what happened, and they're at war with Odo's people. This isn't the time for a changeling pride demonstration.
That's an interesting use of the word.
Yeah. I feel there may be a subtext about other things there.
Yeah, me too.
And not in a positive way. The other thing is, I think this whole speech is the only real ding I have on this episode. I'm going back to my earlier point, because I think it's basically stupid. Because you could apply this to all other races. I want to be bigoted against people who have blue skin or green skin, and look at all Orions as pirates. You could apply this to almost any other race. I mean, yeah, I get your point about how they're very powerful, but if you were a weaker race to Klingons, or let's say your race had been predated on by the Orions, you could have this same bigoted view that all Orions are terrible people.
Yeah, I think the point I was trying to make was that the ones who have that superiority complex usually are the people who have the power.
Yeah.
I think that's all that I was trying to say.
They're abusing their power.
And they're abusing it. Yeah, completely.
I mean, you could look at the Federation and say they could do very nasty things if they became a militaristic conquering race.
I get what you mean. This is a very frustrating scene. And the first time I watched it, I was like, oh my God, this is the worst, this scene.
Yeah.
But maybe what they're trying to do is they're trying to expose that Quark is one of those people who is quite narrow-minded.
Quark's the worst example to have a speech like that because he is so bigoted.
Exactly. But he is the one who has the relationship with Odo that he feels like he can just walk in and say those things. And I really bet he thinks that he's helping.
Yes, guaranteed.
Yeah.
100%.
He thinks he's being Odo's friend by doing this, but he's really just being a jerk.
You see, Odo, being bigoted is natural. We should all do it.
What was the line I had in AR 558? Quark, he's not a diplomat, he's a dumbass. Just showing it again.
Oh, that's a good one. Yes. But this is where I feel strongly about Trek. That part of the Trek universe is the acceptance of other people for what they are. And that if you were a member of the Federation, you'd be trying to accept other people for what they are, providing they're not harming other people. But I guess that's the opposite of the Founders' approach. They look at all of you as lesser. Odo goes to see Lars, telling him that He'll get it sorted out at the hearing. And Lars replied, my word against a humanoid. Who will a magistrate believe? Lars continues telling him that this may finally make Odo understand he does not belong here. He saw the hatred in the Klingon's eyes, and perhaps he'll recognize it, hiding in the faces of his so-called friends. Wow, this guy.
The Klingons always have that look in their eyes.
Yeah, that's just Klingons.
Mm-hmm.
He finally says, even though Odo can make himself appear like one of them, what lies underneath is still alien to them, and they fear it. And that fear can turn into hatred in the blink of an eye. Kind of mirroring what Quark said, this guy and Quark should probably get along.
Yeah, they'd be pals.
We then go to Odo, who's ranting to Kira. He's saying that they're going to extradite him, and Sisko hasn't intervened because Lass is a changeling. Kira tells him he's starting to sound a little bit like Lass, and Odo replies that it's because he's starting to see things more clearly now. He tells her that what she sees isn't really him. This is just a form he borrowed. Kira says to Odo she sees what he is, a good and honest man that she fell in love with, asking him, are you telling me that never really existed? Odo replies that he doesn't know, because part of him wishes he was with Lars, searching for the others, existing as changelings, because that's what he is, a changeling. Kira tells him, maybe you're right. Maybe you do belong out there.
This guy has really scrambled Odo's brain. If you need to be a changeling, be a changeling. No one's making you do anything.
Yeah.
It's very strange. And the same is kind of true with Laz. It's just like you're putting your own insecurities onto somebody else. And now all you've done is make Odo insecure. It's ridiculous. Meanwhile, Kira, the best girlfriend ever, even though her hair remains terrible, she's still a great girlfriend.
She had good hair in the picture.
In the photo, yeah. Mm-hmm.
In security, Kira tells the guard that she needs to talk to the prisoner alone. She walks up to the cell and disables the force field. She then tells Lars to go to an abandoned mining complex in the Corrales system, and she'll tell Odo to meet him there. Lars is initially skeptical and asks why, and Kira tells him, because I love him.
And notice he never says thank you. Jerk.
Why would he?
Why would he? Yeah, there's no reason for him to.
Yeah, the Solid should be happy he's there.
Yeah.
In Sisko's office, he's now asking how Lars escaped. Kira tells a story about how Lars transformed into some kind of plasma energy and forced his way through, escaping through a vent.
It's crazy there's no video surveillance in the holding area.
Yeah, exactly. Worf brings up how an airlock was activated, and he could have shadowed a leaving freighter, so scans would not detect him. Sisko orders Worf to use the runabouts to carry out a sector-wide search, and Odo very sarcastically says, good luck. Sisko has to remind Odo that they should do everything they can to find him. In the turbo lift, Kira tells Odo that Lars is waiting on Corrales 3. She says she doesn't want Odo staying here because of some sense of obligation. She kisses his hand, saying, I hope we find what you're looking for, and leaves. Cut to a shot of Corrales 3, which appears to be the same planet Odo met Weyoun on in Treachery, Faith, and the Great River.
Yeah, it does look similar.
I've seen that world a few times.
I think it's funny Odo comes into this scene with a flashlight. Because he should be able to make his hand a flashlight.
In the mine, Lars is waiting and tells Odo he knew he would come. He says it's a new beginning for them and their people. But Odo tells him he's not going. Lars calls him a fool, saying even Kira knows what's best for him. Odo replies, you really have no idea, do you? You don't know what it means to love someone enough to let them go. Lars says she let you go because she knew where you'd belong. Odo replies, humanoids are not the petty, limited creatures you perceive them to be. What Kira did should prove that to you. And with a very sarcastic tone, Lars says, love conquers all, is that it? Odo tells him, I'm sorry you can't understand. You've done many things, been many things, but you've never known love. Lars tells him, compared to the Link, it's a pale shadow, a feeble attempt to compensate for the isolation monoforms feel because they are trapped within themselves. Odo replies, perhaps the fact that it's not easy is what makes it worthwhile. Lars tells him, the founders are dying. This might be your last chance to exist the way you were meant to. Odo tells him he needs to leave, they're looking for you, and holds out his hand saying, good luck. Lars says, and to you, Odo, you'll need it more than I. And notice he doesn't shake his hand, he just leaves.
Or Link. I thought he wanted to Link again, yeah.
Oh, Really? I took it as, I thought it was just Odo wanted to shake his hand. But, that could have been right.
There's no reason for them to shake hands. Like even the female changeling said she doesn't even really like being in humanoid form and communicating that way.
That's true. Yeah. Either way, he rebuffed Odo.
He did. Yeah, and slinks away. When Laz goes into that thing about the link being, the greatest thing, better than everything.
Yeah.
Maybe this is where we should feel sorry for him and for the founders. The only way that they can be happy, I don't know if happy is the right word, but the only way they seem to be happy is when they exist in a compound of people who think exactly the same way that they think. People with the same hatreds and the same lack of respect and empathy for other living creatures. I mean, when you look at it that way, they are truly inferior creatures.
They just have a skill that very few, if not no other race has. Yeah. But their actual evolutionary development is absolutely stunted.
Nil.
That goes back to your point of the living with people who all think the same way, who don't evolve or refuse to evolve on a emotional, societal way. They think the same way as they always have. They only want to think that way.
Yep.
Back to the station, and Kira is praying, saying, "Watch over him, help him find a way." The door chimes, and in comes Odo. She tells him, "I didn't think I'd see you again." And Odo tells her he couldn't go. Kira apologizes, saying, "If I make you feel like you couldn't be yourself with me, I'm sorry. I want to know who you are, who you really are." And then Odo takes her hands and starts to transform into a glowing, sparkling mist which floats around Kira as she holds up her arms and she smiles. The end.
All I have in this scene in my notes is it says, "No notes."
Oh, okay.
I like that scene. Well, do you have over-analysis?
I do. And let's start with the radical plausibility here.
Mm-hmm.
This was all yet another founder plot. It was all a ruse to get Odo to join back with the founders. After Lars takes Odo around the galaxy for a little bit, he suddenly wants to visit the homeworld, and Odo goes along. All their other attempts have failed. This one is a lot more subtle.
I would believe that, except for the lack of the disease.
Maybe they managed to hide it from Bashir? Maybe this was a less infected guy?
If it wasn't for that, I would agree that that's a possibility, that it was all a ruse. But I don't think this guy really has been in the link.
That's a tough one to get around. Yeah.
Yeah.
I might have to accept that's not a possible one. Next point. Despite all their own propaganda and self-delusion about how all you have to do is change into something, then you fully understand it.
Mm-hmm.
The founders actually have no concept of empathy, love, or actual real feelings.
None.
This is their complete blind spot. Their DNA, their structure, how they're actually made, they have no concept of these things. And this is why they dismiss them and why they are so alien to them in the solids, because they totally don't understand them. They not even understand them. They can't even fathom what they mean. They are just like words on a page.
Yeah, so they decide it's pointless.
Right.
That their feelings are meaningless because they don't understand them.
Yeah, and I think this is where they confuse the ability to perfect changing into something with the understanding.
Mm-hmm.
They mistake the two things.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads on to my next point, which is Odo is the true evolution of the race. He is the first to actually understand empathy, love, even more than that, have a conscience and actually understand the concept of morality and right and wrong. He's not existing entirely on the what benefits my survival and expansion as a race. He's actually able to take a moral eye and look at things and say, is this just? Is it unjust? Is it right? Is it wrong? He's the true evolution.
Yeah, because he could have been on the same exact path that the rest of them are on, considering how unhappy he was with whoever that doctor was who found him, whose name I don't remember. But he was on this path of hatred for him and how he was treated during that time. But he veered into a different direction. And now he has his own feelings, and other people recognize that he has feelings, and he recognizes other people's feelings. And none of the rest of the founders are capable of that.
Yeah, and that's why I think Odo is the evolution.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea.
And my next point is, where did this come from? the prophets.
Oh.
They interfered with the Nagus. They interfered with a quorum.
Mm-hmm.
They changed the Nagus. They repaired a quorum. With Odo, they live outside time. Maybe they looked at Odo and went, oh, this race is in a bad place. It's not a pleasant race. It could be better. They gave Odo this. Because there's a good chance he came through the wormhole.
Or maybe they see, because all time is one thing to them, maybe they see that race actually wipes out all the other races.
Or maybe it's wiped out itself.
Yeah. And so they helped them along. Interesting. I don't know. I almost feel like it's too easy to say that the prophets are doing everything. That's a true overanalysis. I respect it.
Or maybe they did it because they like Kira, and Kira could do with a good boyfriend.
Yeah, they saw all the terrible boyfriends she had and went, you know what? You should at least have one good one. Or maybe he went through the wormhole. We used to talk about this in the early days of the show, where you would talk about some kind of radiation or whatever. Like maybe he was exposed to some kind of radiation. Either he went through the wormhole when he was still in this formative stage that he's obviously in, that the rest of them are not.
Right.
And maybe that helped him evolve. Or he was exposed to something when he was on Bajor, or I don't know, something somewhere else.
Random mutation changed him.
Or it was random, yeah.
Because it's interesting that Lars, who grew up in an entirely different environment, has all the negative characteristics of evil founder woman.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they're baked in. They're hard-coded.
Well, that's why in my overanalysis, one of my points is it just time that turns them into this?
Interesting. Well, over to your overanalysis. Over to you.
Well, wait, it can't be, because in Children of Time, that was like 200 years in the future, wasn't it?
Right, right.
And Odo 200 years later, well,
he
was a little superior, because he like wiped out all those people just for himself.
To save Kira.
Oh.
So you're saying in the future, Odo will become a full founder. No.
Now I'm worried. Because on the one hand, he evolved to, like, he turned into this cover of a romance novel hunk. But on the other hand, he didn't care about anybody but Kira.
Well,
even then.
That, I think, was slightly different, because he lived 200 years on this world, racked by the guilt of Kira's death.
Of her death, yeah.
And I bet he felt responsible for it.
All right. Okay, but there might be something there, too. If there's something in your prophet's theory, there might be something in this theory.
But I think that was because Odo was so damaged by Kira's death.
Yeah, because we talked about him actually being sort of crazy.
Yeah, he hadn't at that point had the chance to even let Kira know how he felt.
Yeah, that's true. So then he wasn't, he was just like them again, because he was a changeling who lived 200 years who really hadn't been able to experience love.
Oh,
and so,
okay. Okay. But he had the ability to. That's the thing. He
did.
And it drove him crazy.
That's funny. All right, well, let's see. My overanalysis, the first point is kind of like your first point.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how dismissive Laz is of Odo and what Odo wants.
Right.
And that was the same exact thing that the female changeling would do. It's like, oh, you don't know what's good for you.
Yes.
The link is better. Everything's better, right? This is different. You don't know what you're doing. They're holding you back. These people don't really love you.
They're almost like a toxic family member or a toxic relationship where they're trying to put things into Odo's head of how he should be thinking about things.
Yeah. Those people in your life who start telling you what you want, you got to get rid of them.
Right. They're not interested in Odo's opinions, feeling, or what he wants. They're telling him how he's wrong.
Yeah, and that ties into your thing, though, that they just can't even fathom feelings and emotion.
Yeah.
And then my next point was this thing we've talked about a few times, where is it time that turns the founders into this?
That's a good point in itself.
Or is Odo the next evolution? Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've beaten that horse quite a bit.
Odo is the evolution.
And I'm becoming obsessed with, what is this Great Link? Is it a primal thing, that fulfills something like actually eating? It fills a hole in their souls? Is it a drug? Is it a cult? It's like, it's just hard to know. And of course, they keep telling the humans that we can't understand what it is, which is a convenient thing for when you're writing it. Oh, you can't understand. It's like, okay.
I think it's so inherent to them that they need to be part of it. If you like, it's programmed in.
Yeah. It's really interesting in this episode to kind of see what it's doing to Kira, just because is this something that's so intimate that it's really like he's at least it feels to her like it's a betrayal. I feel like she is girlfriend of the year, girlfriend of the century. She's trying to allow him to be what he is, but she doesn't really know what he is.
Yeah.
And she can't really relate to what he gets from the link. It's probably similar to when you're in a relationship with someone, maybe who has an addiction or an obsession with something, and you just can't relate to it.
Yeah.
It's like you can hear it, you can hear the person explain it to you, but you just don't get it. You don't get that same thing from it. That would be really hard. And your instinct would be to tell the person that it's bad, because it's pulling them away from you. But in this particular situation, she doesn't really know.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to say it's bad because that would then make him pull away from her for a different reason. It's so unusually complex for a relationship on this show that it makes it really interesting.
Yeah.
My last point, and I don't know if these are overanalysis, this is just my observations, I guess, of what goes on in the show, but Odo made such a good point at the end that Kira showed her true colors by releasing him to go and do what he needed to do.
Yeah.
Because she worried that she was somehow, maybe accidentally, forcing him to be something that he wasn't.
That's a really good point. I mean, her piece about how a sense of loyalty or responsibility.
Yeah. But what she shows by that action is that she's the advanced species because she's accepting of him and what he needs to do. And the opposite is not true. The founders don't accept the humanoids or the monoforms or the solids in any way. They think that they should be controlled, and that's it. And so it's just like, here we see Odo sees what Kira is doing and why it's important. And from the outside, we see that she's the more advanced species.
Yeah, she's recognizing that this may be the very thing Odo needs or has to do. And she's prepared to put her own happiness aside to do the thing that you could argue would be right. Maybe the right choice could have been that Odo forms a new link, a new colony of founders, or a new race of founders.
And really, in the long run, if she did let that happen, she might end up helping Odo create a better version of the changelings.
Yeah.
A group that could actually help others and help advance the universe instead of trying to control it and destroy it.
That the 100 could learn the value set of Odo.
Right.
Lars wouldn't like that.
He wouldn't.
Imagine Lars becoming the, if you like, the outlier of, he's got this weird supremacist thing and he doesn't understand how the universe really works.
But maybe with enough time linking, the evolution would wear off on to Lars. I guess it would depend if the others were the same as Odo.
Yeah.
Yeah, but none of them might if the prophets hadn't touched them or he hadn't had that exposure to whatever the radiation was that caused it.
Some kind of radiation.
Or it was the chocolate. I don't know.
Oh,
something.
yeah, the cocoa beans. Mm-hmm. The intergalactic cocoa beans.
Well, those are all my points. So I'm just going to go to women in the future. And the only thing I have in my women in the future section is that Kira, amazing, but not her hair. Those are what my notes That's what my notes say.
Oh, wow.
Oh, her hair. I don't like her hair, but she's great. Okay, so let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
2 thumbs up. Loved it. Such a good episode. Kira prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to give up Odo to potentially find his true nature, his true destiny. And Odo just displaying how radically different he is from the other founders. And that he actually understands human connection, humanoid connection, love, and the things that are important to the monoforms. Just such a great episode. And, of course, great acting by Hertzler.
Yes.
So, thumbs up.
I agree, thumbs up. And we got to see this conflict again of Odo and how he is drawn to the Great Link. Yeah. He is drawn to his people, but he's so conflicted. And in the past, he was having that really hard time with Kira, and he got really caught up with the female changeling, and he was like, oh, it's paradise, it's the greatest thing. And now he sees, but here's someone who is, maybe she can't link with me, but she's at least respecting that I can make my own decisions. Yeah. And that is not what the founders have done to him.
Oh, no.
Or what Laz was doing.
Well, Lars, I think, summed up the founders earlier where he said, I'm very worried about Odo.
Yeah, well, remember the female changeling? Poor Odo. How many times has she said that?
Oh, yeah, we've tortured you. We've been awful to you. Poor Odo.
Yeah. This guy, Lars, he is just dying to find his people because he is going to fit right in like a round peg in a round hole. Yep. He's ready to jump right in there.
Yeah, he's ready to start a little bit of genocide, maybe genetic engineering.
Yeah. Find
some lower species that he can turn into service creatures.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I would say this is a very good episode.
I would agree with you.
All right, that wraps up Season 7, Episode 14. Come back next week for Episode 15. Where I think we will have Atiba Royster on. This will be our Season 7 with Atiba.
Yes, Atiba should be joining us.
Then, in the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, and we have had so many emails lately, it's crazy.
Thanks, everyone, for sending us your thoughts and comments and your overanalysis.
Yeah, love it.
And your disagreements on AR55.
Yes, we did have a few disagreements on that, but we also just had one yesterday that was in violent agreement with us, which is... which was always good for us.
My new favorite listener.
Anyway, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com. And I don't know if it's tweeting anymore, but we're still on that thing that used to be called Twitter at ReBingeIT. We are also on Threads. You can go there and find us at ReBingeIT. And we are on Instagram and YouTube, all at ReBingeIT. You can also join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.